So,
Is this podcast episode? Ooh, look at me, can't talk. Is this going to be in like a meta episode where we talk about the podcast?
no, 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 no. No. We're actually looking at this.
Cool.
Um,
I'm not seeing your screen.
come on. This is frustrating.
This week has been a heck of a month.
All right, now you can see it, right?
Yeah.
All right. We're still recording, right? Yes, we are. I don't know about you, but uh, days go by really fast. I don't even know what day we're on. I don't know if you know this, but my older son, he swims. Uh,
hmm
he
hmm
swims, and this weekend he has meet on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And he's swimming like 9 events, which is like the most events that he's ever swam before.
That's a lot of swimming.
Yeah. So, but he's a strong swimmer. We're gonna be busy like all weekend. And so, normally when I get to the weekend, I'm looking forward to it because during the week he also has practice and my other kid has stuff going on. And so the week's usually really busy. And then, here we are, and then the weekend continues, right? We don't get that break that we're looking forward to. But I know I feel like in the last couple of days or last couple of weeks, maybe even the last couple of months, you kind of have your own stuff going on. So I wanted to just capture some of that.
Knack for understatement. Yeah, I mean, also similar to you, of course, I have the boys and um our oldest has started school, so there's something now going on every day. The weekends are mostly loose. Um, so it's just a lot of like hanging out at the house and playing with the kids. Took them to the park last weekend. Um, and then of course there's work for me most days of the week, all days of the week, I guess. um, yeah, so we stay pretty busy. I mean, I know you know this. I don't know if I feel like there's no weekend. Like what's a weekend? But on the other side of things, like it's just constantly go, 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 go for sure.
Yeah, definitely know what that's like. I think we've been kind of building to this. This is something that's been on my mind for a while, is the idea of like developer overhead and ergonomics. And and really it's not specific to developers, but being that that's the environment we're in, and then because a lot of times that carries over with you, right? And so I wanted to discuss this topic and then potentially look at ways. I know in your current role, you have the ability to influence this space and to make things better. And that's always been something that's been important for me. Whatever job or company that I've been at, it's always how can I make this better?
Yeah, I want to start with developer ergonomics because this is a term or an idea that I really I think started my career in the trajectory that it is now, where I work primarily in developer productivity and focus on that sort of stuff. Because in our past lives, like it just became something that I became really focused on. And if I could nail that down to one thing, like what is developer ergonomics? It's a little bit about posture, right? Like when you think about like physical ergonomics, it's about like getting your stuff set up in such a way that you can maintain good posture, right? It's making sure your monitor is set up at the right height, your chair and your desk are at the right height, and all of these things. And so it's making sure that you have good posture so that you're healthy. So when I think about developer ergonomics, it's all about that. It's really about like, how do I position all of the things that impact my developers' ability to deliver healthy code, like, and to be productive. So it goes beyond like physical ergonomics. It goes into like the tooling that I put in place. Like, do I have good lint rules in place and good patterns in place that can help them drive like good, healthy code? Do I have like my workday organized in such a way? And we talked a little bit about this last time. And it's do I have my workday organized in such a way that they can deliver their best code? What about timelines? Like I'm really want to lean into this because I think that the first thing I do when I come into an organization and I think trust is an asymmetric advantage. It is you just get more benefit from starting with trusting the people that you're working with. So I say, like, I trust that given two things, that these engineers are doing their best work, that the code that I'm seeing is representative of these engineers' best work with two constraints. The first is time, the time that they have to write the code. Because if that time is constrained, they're going to do the best with what they have, but what they have is not a lot of time. And so they're going to deliver, probably suboptimal code. The other is knowledge. Do they have the knowledge they need to deliver the quality of code that they want, because they're going to deliver to the best of their ability. And so there's an opportunity there to improve that. So when I think about developer ergonomics, it's basically improving those two things, creating their knowledge and or the things that they don't have to think about. So like I, as you know, think building small is a matter of developer ergonomics, because it means that a person has less to think about, and so they're going to build better when I have less, when the mental models of what I'm building are clear. I'm going to build better. But it's also about like having the time that they need to deliver high quality. And that is a part of developer ergonomics, the same way that a part of physical ergonomics is making sure your monitor is at the right level to me. Just like I would make sure that my monitor is at the right level, I want to make sure that my engineers have time to focus on their work. And that's a part of making sure that developers have good ergonomics. And honestly, that leads right into developer productivity, which, is we've talked about in the past, is like my formal title. But what I think I really focus on to a fault is, how do I just keep people productive and make sure
Right.
that they're able to do their best work?
And you know, we've both been at a couple companies in these last couple of years. You come to this company now, you bring with you all these patterns, and we've talked about this before in a term that when in terms of when you join a company, it'd be really cool to bring your own tools with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
like if you go work, if you're a mechanic and you go from one dealership to the next, you bring your own tools. A lot of times they don't provide them. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you need a specialty tool, you buy it, right? That's usually how it works. And we talked about this before in terms of like if we get Anvil up and running, allowing people to bring their own tools, and reducing a lot of the overhead, and making so that way they're as ergonomic as possible. And one of the things for me that makes me more productive, makes me faster, is when my code is super clean and light in terms of
Mm-hmm.
it's very modular.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
this plays into both. This can play into overhead and this can play into ergonomics, right? It plays into overhead because if I have to look at code for longer than I should have to look at it just to understand it, then there's a lot of overhead there, a lot of mental overhead to get started. In terms of ergonomics, how quickly can I add my code to this code, to the existing code, or make a change? And one of those things, there's lots of different tools, but I'll just name one of them. One of them is like Prettier,
Mm-hmm.
right? I shouldn't have to come in and worry about my code not matching the format of the existing code. I shouldn't have to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This should be set up ahead of time, agreed on potentially by the team. And now I may not always agree on the patterns, and that's okay. But if you can abstract that little bit of a headache to where, hey, I don't really agree with this. If you can just have these things set up ahead of time to where when I do a save on my code, and I've seen that before, it's a huge thing that I love. I love format on save. I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have to format.
Right.
And I've joined a team in the past where I come in and I'm used to this, and I like it as a form of ergonomics, and the team doesn't have this set up, and so I go to format something, and of course I inadvertently make a lot of changes. Um, because you see what's there and you're thinking to yourself, man, this is kind of messy. And because it was not ergonomic to begin with, now I have a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
I have to spend a lot of, mental overhead or anguish or time just to understand it and then to be able to make my change. So these things go hand in hand to me. And
Yeah.
so that's just one example of,
This is really great. Before we get too deep into this, I think this is a great opportunity for us to talk about like why Anvil. Like why is this whole project Anvil? And like the reason that I think about that is, of course, like I think about blacksmiths, but a lot of the thing that I think about like when it comes to blacksmithing is twofold. And one is the mentorship model that comes around, like you're right, entry, like a new person to it, then you're a journeyman, then you're a master, and then you're like running a guild or something like that. And I like that model, and I think engineering could benefit from that model of having a formal mentorship and progression in terms of how we deal with it. But the other part is tools, is that blacksmiths, much like mechanics, bring their tools and they get really good with their tools. And like I sort of say this these days, that like I think everybody has a hammer, and the best that you can do is know what your hammer is. Like that's far more important than not having a hammer to me. Like, oh, when you have a hammer, everything is no. Like it's best not to have a hammer, to have a bunch of tools in your tool belt. That's true. But to me, better than like that as an adage is just know what your hammer is, know where your default like tool sets are, because that tells you like those are the tools that you're really good at. The other thing that I think about is like this notion of like you as an engineer are not just an individual. When I hire an engineer, I'm not hiring an engineer, I'm hiring a team, because that engineer is his connections in his network to get engine or his or her like ability to get support and to draw and learn, but it's also the tools that they bring with them and that they're really good at. And like if I'm hiring a team, it would be a bad idea to pay for that team all of that skill that's been invested into these tools and then to not allow that engineer, like not allow her to use it or not, you know. And so those are the things that I definitely think about, just to kind of talk about like some of the bits about tools. And then I love that you mentioned Prettier, because when Prettier first came out, I don't know if you know this, I didn't like it. Um, and then
It's
somebody
it's
said to me,
it's okay. I mean, it goes the same way when you talk to me about TypeScript in the beginning, right? That's another conversation for another day. But
yeah,
I did not like TypeScript in the beginning, but I came around to it.
it grew on you. And Prettier did the same with me, because somebody said something to me. I think it was one of my old friends, Josh, said to me, "You know, Randy, the people that don't like Prettier are the people that are far too opinionated about code formatting." and and I think that's actually true now. And so I'm like, whatever. Like I what I care about more than the specific way the code looks is that I don't have to think about the way that the code looks. Like that's one less thing for me to think about. In the
Right.
same way that you talked
Exactly.
about like the overhead of just adding to the mental model. Like I think the hardest part of what we do in code is kind of like ad copy for the world that we believe exists, and it's like sharing that mental model with the team of engineers that we work with so that we can all work in the same code base because we have the same mental models. And it's exactly like what you mentioned, like if that mental model is messy or too large, like we're always going to have incongruency. And so like that's why one of the reasons is, you know, that I'm really about build small, because
Yep.
that's the easiest way to maintain that mental model as a shared mental model, and for it to be clear.
Yeah. So you mentioned like opinions. Opinions, everybody has them first, right? And I feel
Kelsey.
like, yeah, opinions grow over time. So like if we talk about the progression, imagine you're, early career engineer. You just started learning to code. You don't really have a lot of opinions because you don't know enough to have an opinion, really. And and as you learn, maybe you watch tutorials, maybe you have a mentor or whatever, and you do some code reviews, you start to develop these opinions. And because I'm kind of talking about myself here, and I've seen it in a lot of other folks, but I got to a point to where I was fairly opinionated, probably a couple years back. And then you get to a point where you're like, wait a minute, these opinions don't even matter. And that's where I'd like to get with Anvil is that the opinions don't matter. I want to abstract all the opportunities where opinions can get in the way. So if we're using Prettier as an example, don't take my code formatting. Don't take, the next person's formatting. Why don't we just let Prettier handle that for us,
Yeah.
right? So again, then I don't even have an opinion because it's already taken away from me. And that's not in a bad way, like I'm losing my voice, right? Because we can, as a team, we can determine these things ahead of time. But when I'm writing code, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So we determine that ahead of time. Then when I write code, all I have to do is make the change, right, in the logic. And then when I save it or on a pre-commit hook, it'll reformat the code for me in the way that the team has already designated. Again, now I can move faster because all I'm worried about is does my code do what it's supposed to do? And then all that other stuff is handled by automation, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's the key, is like just getting all that stuff out of the way. I definitely agree with that. And I also, I don't know if I had a ton of opinions when I first started programming. Definitely by the time I had my first professional job, I had some opinions, and but I think what I think I learned over time, and like I remember teaching Git at USAA, and like realizing that like my opinions were becoming detrimental to the productivity of my team. Like I remember like coming to that conclusion and realizing like, hey, is the amount of time that I'm putting into this actually like improving anything? And you know me, I love Git. Like I love Git, and we could talk about it for hours, but I had to realize that like this is worth letting go. This is worth letting go of in favor of letting people work in the way that they work best, um, and realizing that like this doesn't matter as much as I think it does. And so I think nowadays I just come with more questions than opinions, um, for sure.
Yeah, and it's an approach that other people can appreciate and learn from. I remember there was one time when I was doing a code review for someone, and I was, there's a million different ways to solve the same problem, especially in code. And I was reviewing some code, and after the fact, I realized that I was too harsh on it, that it didn't really matter if this person changed to the way I would prefer it to be. It solved the problem. It wasn't bad code by any means. It was just a different way, and I became opinionated. And I think from that point on, I started to be more aware of the opinions and how they can be detrimental to the team. And but there's something that you mentioned not too long ago that I hadn't really heard of before. You mentioned asking yourself the question, does it make the boat go faster?
Yeah, this is, I mean, I love this story. I can't co-opt all of it. I didn't come up with that saying. This was a story from the Olympics in the early aughts of the 2000s.